Frederick Douglass, born Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey, was one of America's greatest defenders of human rights. He was a notorious and eloquent orator, an author, a statesman, and an ambassador. He was also once a slave. He experienced firsthand the evils of racism, and once free, he committed his life to the cause of freedom to ensure all men and women could enjoy the God-given rights referred to in our Constitution. He was not just a defender of black rights, but the rights of all men and women. He said, "My cause was and is the black man, not because he is black, but because he is a man." Around the age 7, he was sent to Y Plantation to join 1,000 other slaves. Later, when his mother died, he was sent to Baltimore to be owned by Hugh Auld. Auld's wife, Sophia, began to teach Frederick the alphabet, much to the disapproval of her husband. Hugh Auld believed that if slaves could read and write, they would be much more interested in freedom and would be much more likely to seek it out. He was right. Douglass said that once you learn to read, you will be forever free. He taught himself to read as a boy using the Bible, newspapers, pamphlets, and trading bread for reading lessons with boys on the streets. The more knowledge he gained, the more the desire for freedom burned inside. Freedom, the heart and mind, tends to create rebellion in a slave, and he began to rebel. So he was sent to a local farmer by the name of Edward Covey, who had a reputation for beating unruly slaves into submission. Frederick was beaten every week for 6 months. Soon, young Frederick began to cave under the relentless torture. He later remembered, "The dark night of slavery closed in upon me." The day came when Douglass fought back. He struggled with Covey until Covey limped away, exhausted, and he never touched Douglass again. Douglass told this story frequently as he encouraged young black men to take responsibility for their own destiny. In his speech, The Self-Made Man, Douglass said, "There can be no independence without a large share of self-dependence. This virtue cannot be bestowed, it must be developed from within." After one failed attempt to escape slavery in 1836, he made a second attempt with the help of Anne Murray, a black free woman, in 1838. Disguised as a U.S. Navy sailor and full of terror of being caught, he relied on his acquired knowledge of ships and sailing, and he bluffed his way past suspicious conductors and runaway slave hunters. His second attempt was successful, and 2 weeks after arriving in New York, he married Anne Murray. He found work and began speaking at abolitionist meetings against slavery. It was at one of these meetings he connected with William Lloyd Garrison, the author of The Liberator and the founder of the American Anti-Slavery Society. Garrison recognized his unparalleled skill and passion honed through enduring the horror of slavery firsthand, and he recruited Douglass to tour the U.S. delivering powerful speeches about abolishing slavery. This was 2 decades before the Civil War, and there was often a violent response to his anti-slavery message. During this time, Douglass also wrote the first of 3 autobiographies, the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. It was very popular and widely read, which came at a cost. He was still legally a fugitive, and soon his freedom was threatened once again. Instead of going into hiding, he fled to Britain. He was in Ireland at the start of the Great Potato Famine, and while he was there, he would meet Daniel O'Connell, an Irish nationalist who would also inspire his later work. In London, he gave one of his most famous speeches, known as the London Reception Speech. In it, he declared, "What is to be thought of a nation boasting of its liberty, boasting of its humanity, boasting of its Christianity, boasting of its love and justice and purity, and yet having within its own borders 3 millions of persons denied by law the right of marriage?" He electrified the country, calling out injustice both in Britain and back home in America. His followers in Britain soon numbered in the thousands, and his supporters in Europe raised money to buy his freedom after 2 years, and he returned to America a free man. Frederick was a patriot, and he believed in America. He once said of the Constitution, "Interpreted as it ought to be interpreted, the Constitution is a glorious liberty document." However, he was unashamed to call out hypocrisy of those who promoted freedom for all created men while enslaving men for their benefit. He said, "There is no Negro problem. The problem is whether the American people have loyalty enough, honor enough, patriotism enough to live up to their own Constitution." Douglass fought for human rights. especially the rights of blacks and women, until his death in 1895. During his life, he inspired nations, helped lead the Underground Railroad, consulted with and advised President Lincoln, served as an ambassador to the Dominican Republic, and was the first black man to receive a vote for President of the United States. Frederick Douglass serves as an example to us all that conviction coupled with action will result in change. His life is a reminder that freedom is given by God to all men, and when this freedom is challenged or limited by any government, it is an injustice that cannot be ignored. He reminds us that our voices matter, and our voice is powerful. He said, "Liberty is meaningless where the right to utter one's thoughts and opinions has ceased to exist. That, of all rights, is the dread of tyrants. It is the right which they first of all strike down." He reminds us that the defense of freedom requires action, even extreme action. He said freedom depends on 3 boxes: the ballot box, the jury box, and the cartridge box. He said if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. In the end, I believe his life's message can be encapsulated in one simple statement: freedom for all, chains for none.